Hi, this is Sean from the intelligenthypnotist.com, and today I'd like to talk to you about the difference between modeling in the sense of NLP on the one hand and deep trance identification on the other. So to do that, I'd like to use two examples. I'd like to use one example of modeling that was done by our friend Tim Halbum, and he did a modeling project of a sommelier, a wine taster. And this was back, I think, in 2012 or something like that. And it actually caused quite a stir in the wine industry. There was a lot of talk about the project and whether it was accurate and what it meant and so on. On the deep trance identification side, I'd like to talk about a project which my friend and colleague Jess Marion just completed and is actually leading a group of students through now, a deep trance identification with Milton Erickson. So let's get down to the brass tacks. What are the similarities and the differences between modeling in the NLP sense on one hand and deep trance identification on the other? Well, modeling principally looks at the model performing at their best. So this may be someone who's really expert at something, such as wine tasting, or it could actually be a client. If you're in the coaching context, your client does their problem really well. So when we model someone at their best, we're looking principally for the strategy they use to do that thing extremely well. What do we mean by a strategy? Well, a strategy, in terms of NLP, we say it's a sequence, and it's a sequence of internal and external representations. Internal, these mean the pictures, the sounds, and the other sensory experiences that we have inside our own minds. So if we speak to ourselves or we play a movie inside our head. External means what we actually see and experience in the outside world. So there's a sequence of these things, pictures that we play inside or things that we say to ourselves inside, things that we experience in the outside. So let's apply that to the context of tasting wine. Have you ever seen a person taste wine, some kind of expert taste wine? Then you'll know what they do externally. They'll take the wine, they'll look at the color. They might swirl the wine and look at what they call the legs, the way the wine runs down the side of the glass. Then they might smell the wine, and they might smell the wine from different distances. So from a little bit further away, from very close, and so on. And then they'll taste the wine and they'll swirl the wine around in their mouth to taste it, so that they get a full range of sensory experience, the visual, the sense of smell, the sense of taste. I don't think they ever dip their finger in the wine, but maybe some people do. So those are the external things they do. And when Tim looked at a wine taster by the name of Tim Geyser, I believe, and this was back in 2011, 2012, it caused quite a stir in the wine industry, in the wine tasting industry. And he looked at what Tim was doing internally as he was tasting wine. And they found some interesting things. I'm not going to go through the strategy which they found, but they found some interesting things, so we'll mention them. When the wine taster is about to smell the wine, typically their eyes go to a certain place. And it's different for everybody. So some people might look ahead, some people might look down at the wine, some people might look off to the left or the right or look up. It depends on the individual, but everyone's got a certain place where they look immediately before they smell the wine. And here's the interesting thing. If they're asked to find that place where they look, like say straight ahead, so I sniff the wine like this, and then you ask them, okay, look to the left, they can't smell the same things. Their sense of smell is different. It's not as sensitive. So there's this optimal point that they've found and anchored where their eyes should go before they smell the wine. And another interesting thing is that it also depends on the context. So if someone is tasting wine or smelling wine in the context of being a wine taster, they may have a different strategy than if they're drinking wine in a social context. So that's a very interesting point. Tim also found that when the wine taster smelled the wine, and he smelt certain, let's say it was fruit, he would actually get a picture inside his mind, probably of that fruit. And he could tell the intensity of the smell based upon the submodalities of the picture. So what does that mean? The submodalities are the qualities of the picture. Things like the size of the picture, how close the picture is. So let's say there was a smell of apple in the wine, and the wine taster saw a picture of an apple, then either the size of the apple or how close the apple was, how far away it was, would determine the strength of that smell. So if there was a strong smell of apple, the apple might be bigger or closer. Less of a smell, it might be more distant or smaller. So the submodalities were used by the wine taster to code the smells and also the taste of the wine. And as these internal pictures were built up, they would be built up in a structure. Okay, so depending upon the strategy of the individual wine taster, the structure might be different. Some might have the fruits ranked vertically, some crossways, some more randomly. In some, the position would be important for the strength of the taste. In some, it would be less important, and so on. There might also be auditory internal cues in the strategy. That means that they might have to say something to themselves to trigger a certain part of the strategy. So they might say inside their own mind, what does this taste like? And then their brain would begin to process the tastes, the fruits, the spices. Was there chocolate in there, or pepper in there, or lemon or lime in there? What were the tastes? Versus if they said, where is this from? Their brain would begin to process in a different way. So a lot of wine tasters used those kinds of auditory cues to determine the part of the strategy which they were going through. So modeling in the NLP sense is looking at how somebody does something in terms of their external experiences, what they do externally, and what they do internally. Okay, let's compare and contrast that now with deep trance identification. Deep trance identification is very much different, and it's based on the theory that if you went through the same sorts of experiences that somebody else had gone through their entire life, then you might end up with the same types of skills that they have. So our approach to deep trance identification, we're looking essentially for 4 types of experiences. The first type of experiences are the formative or the childhood type of experiences where the model was growing up. What did they learn as a child? And that's why the aspect of regression is so important in terms of deep trance identification, is because we want to go back and we want to experience, at least in part, some of the childhood experiences of the model, those experiences that really formed who they were as a person. The second set of experiences are how they mastered the skill, how they learned that skill. Because if I want to have a certain skill, it's nice to know how another person does that, how a master does that now, but it's also good to know how that master actually acquired that mastery. What was the process that they went through in terms of learning? Because if I have to learn a skill, it might or might not be enough to know how they do it now. I still have to learn it, and I might have to go through the process that they went through in terms of learning it, hopefully on a much abbreviated way because of the deep trance identification. So how did they gain that mastery? Then the third part is, how is the model at their best? And this really incorporates the modeling aspects of NLP, but in much more of an associated way, where you become the model and you experience the strategy from the inside. And then finally, and in many ways most importantly, how the model actually deals with failure. Because let's face it, if you're learning a skill, you're going to fail on the way. So how does the model use those experiences of failure to move ahead, to move into their future, to become better? So this idea of how the model deals with failure. And each of these experiences, typically in terms of DTI, is done from inside the model. So associating into the model and having each of these experiences. In terms of the example, Jess Marion took various scenes from the life of Milton Erickson. Probably, I don't know exactly the number, but probably about 20 scenes and episodes from the life of Milton Erickson, and use those to map out these 4 areas, these 4 zones of his life. Early childhood experiences, how he mastered the art of hypnosis, how he performed at his very best, and how he dealt with failure through these specific experiences. And in mapping these experiences, Jess used a tool which we developed called the event matrix, which takes each of those events and then maps them onto things like what was the model believing, what was important to the model, as well as the strategies. So it really opens up those experiences. So I hope this has given you some insight into the differences between modeling in the NLP sense and deep trance identification on the other hand, and how you can use both to become more excellent in your life. That's all we've got time for. I hope you've enjoyed this. Please feel free to comment in the comment boxes below. Thanks, and have a great day.